Breaking news. What effect does Putin's death have on his power? Even in Russia, where nothing is ever black and white, there are a surprising number of unanswered questions about Yevgeny Prigozhin's purported death. Wednesday's crash occurred exactly 2 months after the mercenary group attempted a mutiny against President Putin, and reports indicate that the Wagner boss and several other high-ranking leaders were on board. On Thursday, Putin issued a public statement about the incident, offering his sincere condolences to the families of all the victims, and calling Prigozhin a talented man who made serious mistakes in life. Putin called the crash a tragedy, but many people see it as evidence of a Russian state-orchestrated assassination. This is not an entirely unexpected turn of events. Those who get in Putin's bad books have a history of mysteriously vanishing. Whether or not Prigozhin's death, or even the perception of his alleged murder at the hands of the Russian state, would be good or bad for Putin is just one of many open questions. Putin is currently fighting a losing battle in Ukraine while facing dwindling support at home. How might this event affect his standing, if at all? Even then, it's unclear what to do. Mark Edel, a historian of the Soviet Union and the Hansen Professor in History at the University of Melbourne, told SBS News, "It depends to some extent what happens next." Edel mentioned that most of the Wagner Group's top brass, including Prigozhin, were on the doomed flight from Moscow to St. Petersburg. With the Wagner Group effectively decapitated, he questioned Russia's readiness for what might come next. To rephrase, have they neutralized Wagner to the point where they cannot stage another rebellion? The evidence points in that direction, but we can't be sure. If Wagner is left with enough power to launch a meaningful retaliation, Edel said, it doesn't matter if the Russian state was responsible for the incident or not. The consequences for Putin will be positive or negative either way. It's possible that Putin is in a better position now than he was before, if the leadership of Wagner's so-called private army has been nearly wiped out. So that, as Edel put it, essentially the state's monopoly of violence is restored. However, Edel added, Putin may have risked Wagner's wrath if the suspicious crash did not successfully sever the snake's head and instead merely agitated it. There have been two kinds of threats floating around Russian social media, he said. The first option is to repeat their rebellious march to Moscow. The government probably has a plan in place for just such an emergency. The other rumored threat is that they have incriminating information about the president that they plan to release. When asked about a third possible outcome, Edel hypothesized that the Wagner Group, which is composed of mercenaries and guns for hire, might partially fragment into a handful of terrorist cells if its leadership were toppled. To his knowledge, that is not something any of the Wagner troops have threatened so far, he said. The presence of such quite militant and potentially extreme right groups could lead to the emergence of right-wing terrorism in Russia. While it is too early to tell if any of these threats will materialize, Edel did hint that events could unfold rapidly. He predicted that a serious challenge from Wagner would come within the next couple of days. Even though there are growing currents of resentment in the Russian people, Putin still enjoys widespread support. Some have argued that the optics of the incident could hurt him. Senior lecturer in politics and social sciences at the University of Technology Sydney Olga Oleynikova raised the possibility that Putin's popularity among the public was damaged when he showed leniency toward Prigozhin and offered him exile to Belarus, only to have him possibly assassinated 2 months later. According to Oleynikova's comments to SBS News, Putin's strength has been diminished as a result of this incident. Putin's credibility has been severely damaged in my opinion. I don't see how that could be considered a wise choice. To be honest, I'm shocked that it occurred. Since they, Wagner, should take absolute safety measures. 2 months ago, they, Prigozhin and Putin, also shook hands. It's further proof that Putin can't be trusted in Russia. While the incident may seem beneficial in the short term, as it eliminates the Wagner threat and sends a strong message to any other would-be mutineers, the outcome will ultimately be bad for Putin, according to Oleynikova. Probably they did it to protect themselves for the future if Russian forces are involved. she said, if he is involved. But in the end, I think it will work against Putin. It's still too soon to tell. Wagner members are rallying for action on social media, and some seem to be organizing to exact revenge for Prigozhin's death, but it's still not clear if they have the ability or the resources to back up their threats with action. Prigozhin's death is also likely to remain shrouded in mystery due to the lack of concrete evidence. Oleynikova claimed that the incident demonstrated how dangerous conditions are within Russia's borders. She remarked, "It just goes to show how risky it is to be involved in anything related to government in Russia."